Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we are cutting through the corporate spin on some of the biggest business and technology stories shaping the global economy right now. From Apple's latest gamble in China to Tesla's suspicious order surge, there is a lot to unpack.
And I'm Maya Clarity. We've got 5 stories tonight that on the surface look unrelated, but stick with us, because when you pull back the curtain, the pattern is unmistakable. Giant corporations are scrambling to protect market share, governments are quietly restructuring financial pipelines, and the little guy is caught in the middle as always.
We're talking about Apple launching a budget iPhone into a market where Chinese competitors are eating them alive. We're talking about HSBC pushing a cross-border IPO scheme that could reshape how capital flows between Hong Kong and mainland China. And we're talking about Tesla apparently pulling in a year's worth of Cybertruck orders with a single price cut.
Plus, a fascinating development in affordable electric motorcycles that the legacy auto industry does not want you paying attention to, and a breakthrough in underwater acoustic metamaterials that has serious implications for naval defense. It's a packed show tonight, Alex.
Let's get right into it. Our first story comes from the South China Morning Post, and it's about Apple's newest device, the iPhone 17e. This is Apple's budget entry into the iPhone 17 lineup, and pre-sales began this week. But analysts in China are already pouring cold water on it.
That's right. IDC China research manager Guo Tianxiang did not mince words. According to the South China Morning Post, Guo said the iPhone 17e, quote, lacks competitiveness. He pointed out that the handset, quote, still uses outdated molds, with the chip being the only major upgrade. Think about that for a moment. Apple's idea of a budget phone for the world's largest smartphone market is essentially last year's design with a new processor dropped in.
And it gets worse. Guo specifically called out the shortcomings in imaging and display that persist on this device. So what Apple is offering Chinese consumers is a phone that takes worse photos and has a worse screen than competing devices from Huawei, Xiaomi, Oppo, and Vivo, many of which cost significantly less. This is not a competitive product. This is Apple coasting on brand recognition.
Let's put this in context, Alex. China is not just any smartphone market. It's the most competitive smartphone market on the planet. Chinese manufacturers have been innovating at a pace that makes Silicon Valley look sluggish. Huawei came back from US sanctions and launched phones with domestically produced chips. Xiaomi is pushing into electric vehicles and ecosystem integration. These companies are not standing still.
And here's what the mainstream business press won't tell you. Apple's strategy in China has increasingly been about maintaining premium pricing and profit margins rather than actually competing on features. They're betting that Chinese consumers will pay more for the Apple logo, even when the underlying hardware doesn't justify the premium. That's not innovation. That's brand exploitation.
The iPhone 17e is particularly telling because it exposes Apple's two-tier approach to global markets. In the United States and Europe, Apple can get away with incremental upgrades because the competitive landscape is less intense. But in China, consumers have real choices. They have phones with superior cameras, faster charging, better displays, and more advanced AI features, all at lower price points.
Reporting from the South China Morning Post makes it clear that analysts don't expect this device to move the needle for Apple's China market share. And that raises a bigger question. If Apple can't compete on price and isn't competing on features, what exactly is their China strategy? Because right now it looks like they're just hoping the brand carries them through while they focus on markets where they face less competition.
And we should note that this isn't just about one phone. Apple's struggles in China reflect a broader shift in the global tech landscape. Chinese technology companies are no longer just copying Western innovations. They're leading in many categories. The iPhone 17e, with its outdated molds and persistent shortcomings, is a symbol of a company that may be losing its edge in the market that matters most.
I want to emphasize something Guo said about the chip being the only major upgrade. In a market where consumers are getting foldable screens, 100-watt fast charging, and AI-powered photography from domestic brands, Apple's pitch is essentially, we put a new chip in the same old phone. That's not a value proposition. That's complacency.
Exactly. And the pre-sales will tell the story. If the iPhone 17e doesn't generate significant traction in China during its initial launch window, it could signal that Apple's budget strategy in that market is fundamentally broken. We'll be watching those numbers closely. Let's move on to our next story, Alex.
This one is a big deal for anyone following the financial architecture between mainland China and Hong Kong. According to the South China Morning Post, HSBC's Asia-Pacific chairman Peter Wong Tung-shun has proposed what he's calling an IPO Connect scheme for the Greater Bay Area. This proposal comes right on the eve of China's annual 2 sessions legislative meetings.
So let's break down what this actually means. Currently, there are already connect schemes between Hong Kong and mainland exchanges. Stock Connect lets investors in Hong Kong buy shares listed in Shanghai and Shenzhen, and vice versa. Bond Connect does the same for fixed income. What Peter Wong is proposing would extend this concept to initial public offerings, allowing investors in both Shenzhen and Hong Kong to participate simultaneously in new listings across the border.
And the timing here is not accidental. Peter Wong floated this proposal right before the two sessions, which is when China's National People's Congress and the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference meet. This is the most important political gathering of the year in Beijing. Major policy directions get set during these meetings. By putting this idea out now, HSBC is trying to get it on the legislative agenda.
Now, on the surface, this sounds like a reasonable market reform. More access for investors, more liquidity for companies going public, deeper integration between Hong Kong and the mainland. But let's look at who actually benefits here. HSBC is one of the largest investment banks in Asia. They underwrite IPOs. They manage wealth. Every expansion of cross-border investment flows means more fees, more advisory mandates, and more assets under management for HSBC.
That's the part that doesn't get enough scrutiny. When the chairman of one of the world's largest banks proposes a new financial scheme, we should always ask, who profits? And the answer is almost always the bank making the proposal. HSBC has been aggressively pivoting toward Asia as its European and North American businesses face headwinds. Deeper integration between Hong Kong and Shenzhen is core to HSBC's growth strategy.
There's also a geopolitical dimension here that we need to talk about. Hong Kong's role as a financial center has been under pressure since the national security law was implemented. International firms have been reassessing their presence. An IPO Connect scheme would give Hong Kong a new competitive advantage, making it more attractive for companies to list there because they'd get automatic access to mainland Chinese investors. It's a lifeline for Hong Kong's capital markets.
And from Beijing's perspective, this could serve multiple purposes. It further integrates Hong Kong's financial system with the mainland, which aligns with the broader political project of bringing Hong Kong closer to Beijing's orbit. It also creates a controlled channel for mainland Chinese capital to flow into Hong Kong-listed companies, which Beijing can regulate and monitor.
The Greater Bay Area framing is important too. This isn't being pitched as a national initiative. It's being pitched as a regional one, focused on the economic zone that includes Hong Kong, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and Macau. That's strategic. It makes the proposal seem more modest and manageable, while potentially setting the template for broader cross-border investment reform down the road.
What concerns me is the concentration of financial power this could create. If IPO Connect becomes reality, the major banks operating in both Hong Kong and Shenzhen, HSBC chief among them, would become gatekeepers for cross-border capital flows during some of the most lucrative transactions in finance. New listings are where enormous fees are generated, and the institutions that facilitate cross-border participation would take a cut of every deal.
And we should ask what this means for retail investors. The Connect schemes have historically favored institutional players who have the resources to navigate cross-border regulatory requirements. Would IPO Connect actually democratize access to new listings, or would it primarily benefit wealthy and institutional investors while creating the appearance of openness?
Reporting from the South China Morning Post frames this as a positive development for market integration, but we need to follow the money. HSBC's Peter Wong is not making this proposal out of altruism. This is a business strategy wrapped in the language of market reform. Whether it's good for ordinary investors in Hong Kong and Shenzhen remains to be seen.
We'll be tracking how this proposal is received during the two sessions. Now let's shift gears dramatically, Alex, because our next story is about a very different kind of market, one that's growing fast and flying under the radar.
Absolutely. Reporting from Electrek covers the launch of the Yozma IN10 Pro Plus, a compact electric motorcycle that's pushing prices even lower in what's becoming one of the most exciting segments in electric transportation. These aren't your father's motorcycles, Maya. These are compact, trail-optimized electric machines that sit somewhere between off-road e-bikes and full-size electric motorcycles.
And here's why this matters. While the mainstream auto press obsesses over Tesla and Rivian and Lucid, the real electric vehicle revolution for most of the world isn't happening in luxury sedans and pickup trucks. It's happening in two-wheelers. Globally, electric two-wheelers vastly outnumber electric cars. In Southeast Asia, in India, in Africa, in Latin America, motorcycles and scooters are the primary mode of transportation for hundreds of millions of people.
The Yozma IN10 Pro Plus represents the next step in making electric two-wheelers accessible. According to Electrek, these compact e-motos have been one of the fastest-growing categories in the light electric vehicle space over the past few years. They've carved out a niche that didn't exist before, machines that are more capable than electric bicycles but more affordable and practical than full-size electric motorcycles.
What's significant about this particular launch is the price point. Every time a new model comes out in this category, it's pushing affordability further. And that matters because cost has been the single biggest barrier to electric vehicle adoption globally. It's easy to build an impressive electric vehicle when you can charge over $60,000 for it. The real challenge is building something compelling at a price point that ordinary people can actually afford.
And this is where the story connects to something bigger. The companies driving innovation in affordable electric two-wheelers are largely outside the traditional automotive establishment. They're smaller, more agile companies that aren't burdened with legacy manufacturing infrastructure and dealer networks. They can iterate faster, price more aggressively, and reach markets that the big automakers have historically ignored.
There's a reason the legacy auto industry doesn't want you paying attention to this segment. If affordable electric two-wheelers prove that the technology works reliably at low price points, it undermines the narrative that EVs need to be expensive. It proves that the battery technology and electric drivetrains can be manufactured affordably. And it raises uncomfortable questions about why electric cars still cost so much.
The trail-optimized focus is also worth noting. These machines are being designed for real-world conditions, not just smooth city streets. They're built for terrain, for rural roads, for the kind of infrastructure that exists in most of the developing world. That's a fundamentally different design philosophy than what we see from companies building electric vehicles for wealthy American and European consumers.
According to Electrek's reporting, the compact e-moto category is growing faster than just about anything else in the light electric two-wheeler space. If that trajectory continues, we could be looking at a transportation revolution that bypasses the car entirely for a significant portion of the global population. And the established players in the auto industry would have missed it completely.
Exactly right. This is grassroots electrification happening from the bottom up, not the top down. And it's worth watching closely. Now, Maya, speaking of things worth watching closely, let's talk about an academic paper that might seem out of place on a news show, but trust me, the implications are significant.
This one comes from AR14, the preprint server, and it's a paper on topology optimization of pentamode metamaterials for underwater acoustics. Now, before anyone changes the channel, let me explain why this matters. Pentamode metamaterials are artificially engineered materials that can control how sound waves travel through water. The paper presents an automated framework for designing these materials with precise control over acoustic properties.
Here's the translation for why this is on our show tonight. Underwater acoustic control is one of the most strategically important areas of military technology. Submarines are detected primarily through sound. If you can build materials that precisely control how sound behaves underwater, you can make submarines harder to detect, you can build better sonar systems, and you can fundamentally change the balance of naval power.
The paper describes materials that achieve what they call fluid-like behavior by minimizing something called the shear modulus. In practical terms, this means creating solid materials that sound passes through as if they were water. Imagine coating a submarine in a material that, acoustically, is invisible because sound waves treat it the same as the surrounding ocean. That's the potential application here.
And the fact that this is being published openly on AR14 tells us something. The fundamental science is advancing to the point where these aren't just theoretical concepts anymore. The paper describes an automated optimization framework, meaning they're developing tools to systematically design these materials for specific acoustic properties. This is moving from laboratory curiosity to engineering capability.
The defense implications are enormous, Alex. The United States, China, and Russia have all been investing heavily in next-generation submarine technology. Acoustic stealth is the holy grail of submarine warfare. A breakthrough in metamaterials that can cloak underwater acoustic signatures would be strategically equivalent to stealth aircraft technology was for air warfare. It would reshape military doctrine.
And beyond defense, there are applications in underwater communications, oceanographic research, and even protecting marine life from noise pollution. But let's be honest about where the funding and interest primarily come from. Naval defense budgets are what drive research in underwater acoustics. This paper may be published in an academic context, but the potential military applications are impossible to ignore.
What's particularly noteworthy is the use of the virtual temperature method for ensuring structural integrity. These materials aren't just theoretically interesting, the researchers are solving practical engineering problems to make them manufacturable. That's the gap between laboratory science and deployed technology, and this paper is working to close it.
We're keeping an eye on this space because advances in metamaterials could have profound implications for global security. Now, let's get to our final story tonight, and it's a big one. Tesla and the Cybertruck.
So here's what happened, according to CleanTechnica. Last week, Tesla released a new version of the all-wheel drive Cybertruck priced at $59,990. Now, that's still not the $49,990 price that Tesla promised when they unveiled the truck 7 years ago, but it's a significant reduction from where the Cybertruck has been priced.
And apparently, the response was enormous. CleanTechnica's reporting raises the question of whether Tesla may have pulled in a year's worth of orders with this single price adjustment. Let's sit with that for a moment. A $10,000 price cut on a vehicle that's been widely mocked for its design, its build quality issues, and its broken promises on pricing, and suddenly orders flood in.
There are several things happening here that deserve scrutiny. First, the original price promise. 7 years ago, Elon Musk stood on stage and told the world the Cybertruck would start at $49,990. That was the number that generated hundreds of thousands of reservations. Those reservation holders waited years, and when the truck finally arrived, it came in at a much higher price point with the cheapest version nowhere in sight.
So this $59,990 price point, while lower than the initial launch pricing, is still $10,000 more than what was promised. And Tesla is getting credit for a price cut that still doesn't deliver on the original commitment. That's a masterclass in expectation management. Set an unrealistic price, launch at an inflated price, then cut to a price that's still above your original promise, and the press covers it as a deal.
The order surge also raises questions about demand sustainability. If Tesla truly pulled in a year's worth of orders in a single week, that suggests the previous pricing was suppressing demand significantly. It also means that after this initial rush, order rates could crater. You've essentially borrowed from future demand to create a spike today. That looks great in a press release, but it doesn't necessarily indicate healthy, sustainable demand.
And we need to talk about the broader context of Tesla's business right now. The company has been facing headwinds globally. Competition from Chinese EV makers is intensifying. Elon Musk's political activities have alienated a significant portion of Tesla's customer base. The Cybertruck has been plagued with recall issues and quality complaints. A dramatic price cut that generates a surge of orders is exactly what Tesla needed for the narrative, regardless of whether it's good business long-term.
CleanTechnica's reporting frames this as a potentially positive development, and from a pure demand standpoint, it is notable. But we have to ask harder questions. Can Tesla profitably produce the Cybertruck at $59,990? What are the margins at this price point? And if they can sell it at this price, why were they charging so much more before? Were earlier buyers essentially subsidizing Tesla's production ramp?
That's a critical point. If the economics work at $59,990, then every customer who paid more over the past year or so overpaid. They were early adopters who were charged a premium not because the truck cost more to build, but because Tesla could get away with charging more when supply was constrained and demand from the most eager buyers was highest. That's price discrimination, and while it's legal, it's not exactly customer-friendly.
There's also the 7-year gap between the original unveiling and where we are now. In that time, the EV truck market has gone from zero competition to significant competition. The Ford F-150 Lightning exists. The Rivian R1T exists. The Chevy Silverado EV exists. Tesla no longer has the luxury of being the only game in town. The price cut may be less about generosity and more about necessity.
And let's not forget that the Cybertruck's unconventional design, while it generates enormous attention, also limits its market. Not everyone wants to drive something that looks like it was designed for a science fiction movie. The conventional-looking electric trucks from Ford and Chevy appeal to traditional truck buyers who want an EV but don't want to make a statement every time they pull into the parking lot.
The real test will be what happens over the next quarter. If the order surge translates into sustained weekly orders at a healthy rate, then the price cut worked and the Cybertruck has found its market. But if orders drop off a cliff after the initial rush, Tesla will be right back where it started, with a niche vehicle that generates more headlines than profit.
Now Maya, let's step back and look at the bigger picture, because these 5 stories, as different as they seem, are telling us something important about where the global economy is heading right now.
You're absolutely right, Alex. When we look across all 5 of these stories, there's a common thread. The era of easy dominance for Western technology companies is over. Apple can't coast on brand alone in China anymore. Tesla is being forced to cut prices on the Cybertruck as competition catches up. Meanwhile, Chinese companies are driving innovation in smartphones, electric vehicles, and financial markets at a pace that Western incumbents are struggling to match.
And the HSBC story is the financial infrastructure piece of this puzzle. The push for IPO connect between Hong Kong and Shenzhen isn't just about market access. It's about building the financial plumbing for a new economic reality where capital needs to flow more freely between mainland China and international markets. The banks that position themselves to facilitate those flows will be the winners.
The Yozma e-moto story represents the piece that gets overlooked entirely. While the big players fight over the premium market, smaller companies are quietly building affordable electric transportation that could leapfrog the entire traditional automotive model in developing economies. That's not a story about one motorcycle. That's a story about the future of mobility for billions of people.
And the metamaterials research reminds us that behind all the consumer technology and financial maneuvering, the fundamental science that will shape the next century of military and industrial capability is advancing rapidly. Whoever masters materials that can control sound waves underwater will have a strategic advantage that no amount of market share in smartphones can match.
What strikes me, Alex, is the disconnect between the stories that get the most attention and the stories that matter most. The iPhone 17e and the Cybertruck will dominate headlines because they're consumer products from famous companies. But the affordable e-moto revolution and advances in acoustic metamaterials may have far greater long-term impact on how people actually live and how nations actually project power.
That's the Truth Report difference. We don't just tell you what happened. We tell you what it means and who benefits. And tonight, the answer is clear. The global economic order is shifting. The companies and countries that adapt fastest will thrive. The ones that coast on past glory, whether that's Apple's brand premium or Tesla's first-mover advantage, are going to find the ground shifting under their feet.
And the financial architects like HSBC are already positioning for this new reality, proposing the infrastructure that will channel capital toward the next generation of opportunities. Pay attention to the plumbing, folks. That's where the real story always is.
Before we go tonight, I want to leave you with this thought. Every single story we covered tonight involves a choice. Apple chose to release a phone with outdated molds. HSBC chose to propose financial infrastructure that benefits its own business model. Tesla chose to cut prices after years of overcharging early adopters. These aren't natural forces. They're decisions made by powerful people and powerful institutions. And our job, your job, is to understand those decisions and hold those decision-makers accountable.
That's exactly right. Don't just consume the headlines. Question them. Ask who benefits. Ask who pays the cost. Ask what's not being reported. That's what we do here on Truth Report, every single day.
That's our show for tonight. I'm Alex Truth. Thank you for watching, thank you for thinking critically, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow. Stay informed. Stay skeptical. Stay engaged.
And I'm Maya Clarity. Remember, the truth doesn't have a bias, but the people who try to hide it certainly do. Good night, everyone. This has been Truth Report.